Okay, so we are starting with Chapter 8. Chapter 8 is all about aqueous solutions. You remember seeing in chemical reactions AQ. This stands for aqueous. And what aqueous means is that water is the solvent. So before we get into that, let's define some of these things. So a solution is something that's made up of two parts. It's made up of two parts, the solvent, which is what you have more of, and 99% of the time, this is water. So water is sometimes called the universal solvent. In an aqueous solution, water is the solvent. Anytime you have an aqueous solution, that means this solution was dissolved in water. The other part of the solution is called the solute. This is what you have less of. This is something that you are dissolving into the solvent. So the solution is made up of two parts, a solute and a solvent. And the solvent is what you have more of. Most of the time it's water. It's always water in an aqueous solution. And the solute is what you have less of. So there's different ways to talk about solutions. One thing that's really important to know about when you are talking about a solution is the concentration. The concentration tells you how much solute you have per solution. So sometimes we talk about concentration in grams per liter, which is a unit of mass per a unit of volume. This is the less of the common ways that we will talk about concentration. Most of the time we will talk about concentration in terms of something called molarity. And molarity has been discussed before, but we're going to talk about it a lot more in these next few chapters. So what molarity is, it is the uppercase M is the abbreviation for molarity. And what molarity is it is moles per liter. Moles of solute per liters of solution. This SOL with the N, this like an exponent N, this is the abbreviation for solution. So molarity is a way that we describe concentration, moles of solute per liters of solution. The volume always has to be liters. So if I tell you I have a 6 molar solution of HCl, hydrochloric acid, or hydrogen chloride, that is the same thing as saying that I have 6 moles of HCl per 1 liter of solution. So that's what this means. And when you see this 6M, you would say 6 molar is what you would say out loud. You wouldn't say 6 molarity. So this is molarity, and this is the unit that we will mostly be using when we are talking about concentration. So oftentimes you will be given a problem where it says if you dissolve this many grams of solute in this volume of water, what is the concentration? So we need to be able to go from grams to moles, and then moles and volume to molarity. So let's look at an example of that. So this says calculate the molarity when 734 grams of lithium sulfate are dissolved in 2,500 milliliters of water. Okay, so we're calculating molarity. So anytime you're doing problems like this, as they get more complicated, it's important to see what you're given and what you're asked for. And then write the steps to go from how you're going to get from what you're given to what they're asking. This question is asking for molarity. What is the molarity? When you have 734 grams, so that's the mass of lithium sulfate, which we're going to need to identify what compound that is, equals 734 grams. And then the volume of the solution is given to us 2,500 milliliters. So we know that molarity is moles per liter. Well, we have grams and we have milliliters. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to convert grams of lithium sulfate to moles of lithium sulfate. And then what we're going to need to do is we're going to need to convert milliliters to liters. So those are the two things we need to do before we can calculate molarity. First of all, we need to determine what is the molecular formula of lithium sulfate. So this is something that everybody should feel comfortable doing at this point in this class. So you need to be able to determine what is the compound of lithium sulfate. So lithium is in group 1 on the periodic table, so it's Li plus 1. Sulfate is a polyatomic ion that you are responsible for knowing from 161 from the first quarter of general chemistry. I will post a list of all the polyatomic ions that you are responsible for. Sulfate is one of them. Sulfate is SO4 2-. So when we write the molecular compound of lithium sulfate is Li2 SO4. It's important that we have the compound correct because we cannot determine the correct molecular mass if we have the formula of the compound incorrect. So from this Li2SO4, I'm going to determine the molar mass, which remember is just the sum of all of the atomic masses in this compound. So I would have 2 lithium, so I'll write this out just this first time. So I'm going to have 2 times the molar mass of lithium, which is 6.94 grams per mole, plus sulfur, which is 32.07 grams per mole, plus 4 oxygen, 4 times about 15.99 grams per mole. This is going to give you a molar mass of about 109.95 grams per mole. So this is going to be a little bit different depending on which periodic tables you're using to look up these molar masses, but when we get to the end and we solve with the correct number of significant figures, you should have the same answer. Okay, so here's my molar mass. So I'm going to use my molar mass in this step right here to go between grams of lithium sulfate and moles of lithium sulfate. So this is a dimensional analysis problem where anytime you have a problem that has 2 units in it, like this molar mass, you're going to use it as a conversion factor. So I'm going to convert 734 grams of lithium sulfate to moles of lithium sulfate. So I'm going to say 734 grams of lithium sulfate divided by the molar mass, 109.95 grams of lithium sulfate per 1 mole of lithium sulfate. Grams will cancel and I'm going to be left with moles. So that means I have about 6.68 moles of lithium sulfate. So the question is asking for molarity. Molarity is moles per liter. So how many liters do I have? Well, I have 2,500 milliliters. So the conversion is that there are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter. So if I have 2,500 milliliters and there are 1,000 milliliters in 1 liter, that means I have 2.5 liters. So I have 6.68 moles divided by 2.5 liters. That's going to give me a molarity of about 2.7 molar. Remember, whenever we're solving for our final answer, we need to pay attention to significant figures from the problem. So this number has two significant figures. 2500 has two significant figures. This number, 734, has three significant figures. Our answer needs to have the fewest number of significant figures in the problem. So it needs to have two significant figures. So the concentration of 734 grams of lithium sulfate in 2,500 milliliters of water is 2.7 molar.